All right. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing at ETH Denver? Ow! All right. My name is Kevin Seagraves. I'm the CEO of NiftyApes. Been in the space for a while. Was involved in the ETH Denver, ETH Boulder organizing community. Was the author of Gitcoin Grants V0. Was one of the co-founders of the ETH Security community. And I'm here to talk about NFT seller financing. So the topic of this talk is basically like how to advance DAO finances. We've created a new financial primitive that DAOs and other people can use to finance purchases with NFTs. So really the tagline is buy now, pay later with terms that don't suck. If you want to buy an NFT with 20% down, 0% interest over 6 months, this is a system that enables that. It's a new risk model that is an advancement in NFT financialization and NFT lending. So let's get into it. See, how does this work? The problem is buyers want to use financing. These terms are too damn high. The LTVs are too low, the durations are too short, and APRs are too high. Typically, LTVs are like a 70% LTV, meaning like, or a 30% LTV rather, meaning it's a 70% down payment if you were to purchase this with an NFT. The duration is typically anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days, so not very long. And the APRs are generally on your blue chips, 30 to 40%, and on middle range assets, it's like 50 to 60 APR, which is pretty terrible if I'm trying to buy something. Why does this happen? Basically, there's a third-party lender who's providing liquidity, right? The buyer wants to buy an asset. A seller has listed it for sale. They say, hey, lender, I need some money to go pay this seller. So the lender gives them a 30% for the down payment. The buyer turns around, and now they've got a 70% down payment they're going to give to the seller. And they need to pay back the lender 50 to 60% APR over 30 days. The seller then exits the system with that 30% of the value, right? Which increases risk for the two remaining actors, buyers and lenders. The solution is seller financing. It's a model that is seen ubiquitously throughout traditional finance, but has not yet been applied to Web3 and to NFTs. So we allow sellers to finance terms directly to the buyer. So now the buyer says, okay, I'll just give you 20% now and then pay you in installments over time. That's it. Way more simple, right? So by removing that third-party lender, we enable higher LTVs, longer durations, and lower APRs. This is now available. We launched to mainnet yesterday morning, and we're now in prod at marketplace.niftyapes.money. This is actually our first integration on top of Reservoir. So this doodle is available right now. 1.19 ETH down payment, 0% interest over 6 months. We got a couple other things listed. Please go check it out. Also, announcing the NiftyApes SDK. If you have a marketplace and you want to offer seller financing to your users, we have a product for you to be able to do so. This is a main go-to-market strategy, so please come talk to us. I'm wearing this yellow T-shirt. You know where to find me. There's more T-shirts over here. Andre's got a big pile of them, so feel free to grab one at the end of the talk. So this enables, again, NFT seller financing in any NFT marketplace. Also announcing Season 2 of Banana Drops. We've been running for the last couple months a Banana Drops campaign. So if you perform certain actions on the NiftyApes platform, you can be rewarded with an NFT. We're now launching Season 2 to award points for certain actions in the NiftyApes marketplace. How does this benefit DAOs? So DAOs typically have a treasury. Those treasuries are trying to figure out how to extend runway in this bear market. Running a seller financing strategy is one way to generate yield. the business model is actually pretty attractive. So if someone defaults, what happens, right? In the first case, let's say it's a 100 ETH asset. I'm selling it to the buyer. I say, hey, buyer, give me 20% down, and then you can pay me the rest over the next 6 months plus interest, right? Seems pretty good. If the buyer defaults, I get to keep the down payment and any payments they've made so far, and I get to keep the asset that I can then resell, right? So as a seller, I'm significantly hedged on the downside, right? My carry risk during that loan, basically the down payment is my volatility margin. I now have the ability to maintain a lot of value in the downside case. So if you're an NFT DAO or an NFT DAO like collection, you might want to run a strategy where you hedge your downside risk, your carry risk on your NFTs by selling a couple with seller financing. Other tools that we've built for DAOs. So we also offer rolling lines of credit. So if you have an NFT that you would like financing on, you want to get liquidity but not have to sell your asset, you can now come get a loan on NiftyApes, and each month you just pay your interest payment and roll it over to the next month. You don't have to pay back your whole loan and do another price discovery and do the whole rigmarole of finding another lender. You just click a button, pay your interest, and roll the loan over in perpetuity. This is another major advancement in NFT lending. We just decided to share seller financing because it's even more exciting. We've also developed DAO bonds with Hedgie. Shout out to Lindsay. I saw him over here yesterday. Hedgie guys are great. Basically, a DAO can lock up ERC20 tokens inside of an NFT. They can use this for vesting, or you can do like treasury swaps. You can do really cool things with Hedgies. One thing you can do, once you've locked your ERC20s inside of an NFT, is you can borrow against it, or you can lend against it, either way. And so what you can do as a treasury, you lock up your ERC20s, and then you can go get liquidity from a lender against that asset. If you, the DAO, default, then the lender acquires a stake in your DAO. The other option is to just like get more runway, build more product, and get to revenue. So these are some of the other products we've built for DAOs. And that's the end of my talk. We got another 11 minutes on the clock. Let's see, actually, we can see the NiftyApes marketplace live. Buy now, pay later with terms that don't suck. These are the assets we currently have for sale. These are our featured offers, rather. So yeah, I will end it there and see if there's any questions from the crowd. Anybody got anything? Yeah, what do you got?
How do you think about the credit worthiness? Like, I mean, you're talking about a lending platform. So anyone can get this rolling line of credit or bonds. Like, how do you think about credit worthiness as a way to decide whether someone gets lending or not? Like, somebody can borrow or not?
Yeah, so that is up to, basically, these two products are collateralized lending, right? Rolling lines of credit and DAO bonds, there is collateral backing that loan. So if the borrower defaults, the lender can seize that asset. Similarly, in seller financing, there's an NFT backing that loan. But the counterparty risk, which I think is what you're asking about, the counterparty risk is basically nullified because I have this asset that I can reclaim. And so seller financing is actually a form of uncollateralized lending. Typically, in DeFi, the borrower has to put down some collateral that can then be seized by the lender. With seller financing, the seller's actually posting the collateral, selling that asset, and the buyer is just putting a down payment. They're just buying the asset. They're beginning the purchase process. And if the buyer doesn't complete that process, then the seller gets to reclaim that item. Any other questions? Andre's saying we got t-shirts. So if anybody would like one of these that features bananas, yeah, you got a question? What's up?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Specifically on the seller financing for both buyers and sellers, how do you think about price volatility? Like if I'm buying an NFT over the course of 6 months, what if that asset either appreciates or depreciates? Is that price locked in at the outset, or is it variable over that time?
Yeah. So the price is locked in at the point of sale, right? So as a buyer, maybe I'm treating this like a pseudo call option, right? do I think the price of this asset will be more at the end of, let's say, 30 days, right? If yes, then I'll lock in my price. The price moves up. I then realize the loan, and I can sell on spot. What's cool is we actually, in a fast follow feature, we'll have the ability to list the asset for sale at any time, as long as it can pay off the loan. So the question becomes, do I think this asset will be worth more at the end of 30 days? Instead, it will be, do I think this asset will be worth more at any point in the next 30 days? Because I can exercise that option at any time. I can actually set a limit order and allow the market to move in that direction. Once I pass the floor price, that asset, in theory, will get exercised, it'll pay back the loan, and me, the buyer, gets to keep the profit. As a seller, the down payment is my volatility risk, right? So let's say I sold it for 100 ETH. I got a 20% down payment, so 20 ETH, I'm now 80% like LTV. The price has to drop 20% for that buyer to have game theory reason to default on the loan. Over time, if you're making installment payments, each installment payment de-risks the loan further, right? So let's say I'm making a 15 ETH payment each month. Cool. Month 2, I now have 35 ETH volatility margin off of my original price. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One other question, though, is just in terms of like the buy now, pay later model, whereas if you're a seller and you're not getting any APR over the course of this 6 months, is NiftyApes paying the seller the full price up front, or are they collecting it over the term of that loan? Because my understanding with like the Affirms of the world, if not the Affirms of the world, retailers and merchants are receiving the full price up front when somebody purchases, a T-shirt or a pair of sneakers, and it's a firm that's taking the credit risk over that period of time, not the merchant itself.
Yeah, so the terms are entirely set by the seller. So basically, the terms that we're displaying here are for example. But what's cool with seller financing is I can provide a markup. So let's go back to the 100 ETH asset example, right? I can buy it at spot for 100 as a seller. Let's say it's my cost in. I can list it for 100 and 2.5% markup. And if I'm selling it to you over 6 months, like that's still pretty attractive. But I can lock in a 2.5% gain on that sale. So it's kind of a synthetic APR, rather. So it's like you can do it either way, but 0% looks like way better, right? Like that looks pretty baller. That's something I want as a buyer. So that's kind of why we displayed it the way we did. We plan on offering kind of normalized terms. There is kind of a game theory optimal return and as a way to set set terms. And most of that's based off of like historical volatility, et cetera, et cetera. There's like whole models for this. And so coming soon, basically.
Okay. Sweet, thanks.
Any other questions from the crowd? Yeah, we got another one up here.
Oh, sure. Here you go.
And I'm just standing over here to hear you a bit better.
Okay. I'm kind of curious. The way we think about the returns on NFTs is very different from like what you would think about returns on a normal financial product, right? Like people are thinking about 20%, 30% returns. And how does that play into any of the credit lines in this? Like, how do you think about it, and why is that the case in the first place? Like, just kind of give me a little bit info on that. And I think you just mentioned the game theory part on how the volatility kind of historical prices are. So can you talk about that a little bit as well? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So how do you think about returns? So as a trader, so we are a protocol. We're not necessarily a market maker at this point in time. We are listing some for sale, so you could say that like, okay, we're trying to seed the market. But how does a market maker kind of determine what the prices should be and what their return is going to be? Depending on, there's a couple variables. So it's the duration of the loan, it's the default rate, it's the down payment, it's the interest rates, it's my markup. Right? All of those factor into what my return might be. And the better those terms are, the higher my returns are. The biggest factors are the amount of down payment, because that's my volatility risk, which then affects my default rate. I actually make more money as a market maker when people default, because I realize a gain they've defaulted, I get that 20%, and I relist that asset for sale. So my volume of capital is actually much, much greater. The shorter the duration of my loan, also the higher the volume of my capital. So my original pile of money compounds faster in those kinds of circumstances. So I think that answers your first question. I forget your second question. Can you ask it again?
You were talking about game theory being used to determine the price margin and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, so that's just kind of like traditional financial modeling. There's not really anything special about this particular model, other than that it's Web3 native seller financing. So this is a straight up loan. It's a mortgage essentially, and when you get a mortgage on a house, it's also like a call option. You're basically putting a call option on that house, on that neighborhood. You think the value of that house is going to go up in value. And so this is just like, these are more speculative, highly volatile assets, and so you see more of that dynamic. So basically, modeling out the game theory, figuring out what's the optimal terms to provide, it's a question of basically, finding the right model, doing the right simulation, and probably running some ML.
So it's not... So doing this on Web3 is not very different from doing it on a normal real market thing. I mean, there's no difference that comes from this being a decentralized platform.
So this is a very Web3 native mechanism. So what happens is, in the traditional world, to do seller financing, like if I have a house and I want to seller financing, it's pretty scary, right? The legal risk of doing it right, the time and money to get a lawyer to do it for me. What happens if I have to repossess the house? Like, that's really hard to do. These are digitally native assets, right? So basically the legal risk is now abstracted away to the smart contracts. It's just in a protocol. We'll do it all for you. You set the terms. It just happens. It's magic, right? If someone defaults, I don't have to worry about kicking them out of their house. I can, with a button click, seize your asset and repossess. So this is a very crypto-native system, which is different than a traditional market. These aren't true options. So doing it all like in a traditional market, it has similar dynamics, but there's not a one-to-one translation. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, and we have one more over here. We have a minute and 14 seconds on the clock.
Two very small ones. One is the asset is held in escrow as the... Okay, the second one is, why would sellers want to sell on this platform rather than somewhere where they just sell and instantly get their money?
So first is the escrow. It is an escrow. Buyers have the ability. There's two ways to verify ownership, right? So there's a pull function. So you can ask the contract, hey, does this address own this asset that it says it does? Yes. That's possible. The other is a push. So it's called a flash claim. Basically, you can write a smart contract integration that will say, okay, hey, the message.sender of this transaction is the owner of this asset in escrow. It'll pull that asset out of escrow, give it to this integration contract. It can do any arbitrary action, vote in governance, like a Nouns DAO. It could claim an airdrop. It could do whatever you want on-chain action. As long as that asset is returned to escrow by the end of the transaction, the protocol does not care. If it's not returned, the transaction reverts, and it's like nothing happened. So that's answer number one. Answer number two was, why would sellers want to use this rather than just sell on spot? I can get a stream of revenue. I can sell for more. There's basically like pretty interesting dynamics in the business model of why a seller would want to do this. Your typical seller, maybe it's a little bit harder to understand, but as a more sophisticated trader, these are dynamics that are very familiar and attractive. So that's a little bit of an ambiguous, vague answer, but happy to talk more about it after. I'm at negative 29 seconds. I think that's it for everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Happy ETH Denver. Have a great day, everybody.